Hi everyone, we are live on all the channels, so I'm going to give everyone a second here to settle in because, to go live on so many different places means I got to check to make sure they all are there. So we will see. So hopefully we're on Facebook and YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Yes, let's see. So turn off this one. Yes. So hopefully everybody's settling in for their lunchtime if you're over here on the East Coast. And I see that we're okay. We're definitely okay here on YouTube, so that's good. And then let me just make sure we're good on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we are.
I think we're good. Okay. So in that case, we can go ahead and get started. If I can figure out how to minimize half of these windows. So thanks everybody for being here. And we'll go ahead and get started. So I am super excited today to have Walter here with us. Walter Dusseldorp is a healthcare leadership coach, author, and business consultant with more than 30 years of experience developing high-performance teams and individuals, also known as the Dutch Mentor. He is the creator of the Pure Leadership Power methodology, an action-based approach to building real leadership capacity rather than collecting just more theory. So thank you so much, Walter, for being here.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I look forward to having a great conversation and dive into some very meaningful subjects.
Yeah. So, you've had leadership with hundreds of people as a senior healthcare executive. And yet, what you remember, back in the day, before you became FACHE, American College of Healthcare Executives, before you created all your frameworks, we're going to go all the way back to sort of what it was like when you first had those first leadership positions, because our episode today is really about people who are dreaming and thinking and wanting to eventually get to where you have been, and also not sure exactly how it takes in this ever evolving world. So you said that the hardest part in your leadership career was that no one ever prepared you to lead. And so can you take us back to the moment when you first realized that your clinical and technical skills wasn't going to be the only thing that helped in your leadership journey?
Yeah, so thank you. It's a great question, and it is often one thing that is overlooked in our careers, and where we should be supported by our organizations, we are not. We take for granted that because you have maybe real great talent and a technical skill, and I certainly was very, talented in my craft, and of course that made me more attracted to go become a supervisor and manager at that point in time, and I was recruited into that position. But then I really didn't receive any insight of what leadership was. So all I really knew what to do was to do more of what I was already doing. But then you figure out very quickly, well, if you do for others, that's not really leadership. And then they will look at it, you're a micromanager, and that does not help with building trust and engagement. And those are the two things that are so critically important for building high performance individuals and teams. That the non-negotiable trust factor needs to be there. And two, you can do things to people, but you need to do things with people and get them to buy into it and not make them do things that they either don't understand the why behind it. And of course, I learned that the hard way. Now, good thing is that I had a really good mentor early on who was able to guide me to make it, he allowed me to make mistakes, because he then used those mistakes to point out to me, so let me show you a different way of leading. And I'll be forever grateful. Ed Horton was my first mentor, and he's still around today, still speaking from time to time. And I still look up to him today, even though my career is far surpassed where he ended his career and retired. But I will forever be grateful for that person. And we all need that person in our lives, especially early on, that's willing to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And that is the sad thing about many people, especially in technical driven environments like healthcare, where you and I are both working, is that people who are technically sound don't necessarily make the best leaders, and certainly not if they don't have good mentorship and a framework. Leadership is a profession, period. Not an MBA, not a bachelor's degree, not an MD. It's a profession on its own, and we need to start treating it as such.
Those are there's so many good nuggets in there, the whole thing about doing to people versus doing with people. And at the end of the day, we are all helping others come alongside because together with the really disparate teams that are different, people with different skill sets can actually do greater things
Course.
together.
Yeah.
But like you said in the beginning, all of us in the science and the technical fields are very attached to the details of what we get to control and are very proud of the micro work that we can do. We often don't get encouragement or feedback, I would say that how are we doing as a collective? And instead, we are very much praised for our singularity, I suppose, or as people have said, autonomy
Mhm.
or ability to be like the one, the diva, I suppose.
Yeah, 100% correct. And that's again the importance of knowing that for yourself by raising self-awareness. And again, the small minority of the people really have that level of insight of self. And yes, there are people who are innate leaders. They really truly understand and get it, and they were likely led by others, or they just have it in their DNA. But that's not true for most of us. For most of us, and you think about as a physician leader yourself, it is that you are thrown into it. You're likely the one who sat in front of the classroom with paying close attention to get through all of your studies. And next thing you know, you're going to do your internships, and you are already looked at as a leader of a small team, and then a resident, a little bigger team, and then a fellow, and then a doctor. And like it's not just taking care of the patient, but you have to take care of the people around you, the doctors, the nurses, the administrators, so on and so forth. But they really didn't prepare you for that in medical school
Mm.
or nursing school, or for that matter, in healthcare administrative school. And that is really where we need to, we hope that we have that one person who will tell you that things are not going right, and that is willing to give you the room, the safety to be able to explore, to fail, but to fail fast and fail forward.
Yeah. It's funny, a lot of people just struggle inside. They're quiet about it. They don't really want to talk about it. Especially it gets worse the higher up you go. I mean, you really feel like there's less and less people that you can trust. And even though there are smaller and smaller circles of people who really understand and can keep things confidential, there's a lot of fear, I think. Which is obviously why people find people like us. They find coaches because
Yeah.
the only person who can really help them quietly and privately would be an individual executive coach. But I think that maybe doesn't have to be that way. I'm curious, like what are some of the inner feelings that you see when people begin to realize I might want to do things differently? Like what are some of the warning signals? Because some for a lot of people, it's actually just even awareness that there is an opportunity to do something different. If you can't see it, you can't change.
Yeah, no, 100% correct. I think most people get to see it when they start interviewing for new positions, and they fall short over and over and over. And finally, somebody's becomes aware enough, so maybe I should ask a professional why that is. And 90% of the people that I work with who come to me in that position, I say, well, send me a recording of your interview, and usually within a couple of seconds of listening to that recording, I know exactly why they did not get to the next level. Why did this? So. I'm a Dutchman. We are known to be very forthright and pragmatic and say it the way it is, not dance around a whole lot. Culturally speaking, in this country, that's not how it is done. People are very afraid for some reason because if I don't go along, then I will be passed over for a promotion, or I might step on somebody's toes. Listen, there's a lot of truth to that, right? There's a fine middle ground to that. You can't be too straightforward, but at the same time, you cannot withhold. So we need to create safe environments as leaders where people feel that they can speak openly. And one of those areas could be is that when we have a conversation, no different than you would go to Alcoholics Anonymous, who you see here, what you hear, let it stay here, is that we need to drop titles and really be vulnerable to each other. A
Mhm.
great leader knows when to be vulnerable. A great leader will tell the people that they lead on when and where they failed and how they overcame those failures. And don't make failure a bad thing. Failure is actually a good thing along the way of your growth journey. And for that purpose alone, we again promote people into roles, clinical and non-clinical, usually good, solid technical people. And then we say, as the boss, well, listen, I will coach and mentor you. Well, that's just the biggest lie we tell any new employee, because the boss doesn't have the time, or often not even the insight of what really coaching or mentorship is. So they will say, well, we'll meet once a month for our one-to-one. Well, 45 minutes of that is consumed by whatever, and maybe 5 or 10 minutes is dedicated to mentorship, if that at all. And that's what we need to change, right? So there's interesting statistic that came out in 2021, a large study from McKinsey. 95% of executive leaders know that leadership development is needed and required in order to build high-performance teams. Sadly, only 5% of those took meaningful action to develop their leaders. And what we have seen is that most healthcare organizations try to do the right thing through HR or maybe leadership development. They set up a cohort of maybe fellows, right? People who have been identifying the top 1%, and they enroll 20 or 30 of them per year into the program, and they spend quite a bit of money on it. All great. The problem is in an organization, most organizations today, because all systems have 45,000 employees, and they have 6,000 leaders, of which 90% of them are the leaders who really take care of people on the front line. But 30 over 6,000 is not very good. So that means that there are many people who never really get any kind of support they need in order to flourish as leaders. And many of them struggle, many underperform. Most of the time, 75% of the performance indicators they set for that year are lagging. And it is not until the organization awakes and understands that retention is more important than re-recruiting or replacement. And replacement is exceptionally expensive, and start redirecting some of those dollars in the right places by giving people daily and weekly support, not just a month, classroom to go to, or a small cohort of fellows that come out of it. And that's really what we are, that's what we're facing. It's also part of the reason why it's so difficult to become a high-performance organization. And there are clear examples around the country. Scripps, for example, in San Diego, their leader has figured out on how to do it well. And the organization, because of that, is doing exceptionally well. And there's a bunch of other ones, but many of them are not in that category today.
I think I also just comment the fact that there are just so many ways you can move the needle forward. I think a lot of times people forget that from their national professional societies to their local and their regional, there are some kinds of leadership education, and part of it's education, part of it's coaching, part of it's mentorship, part of it's sponsorship, like in terms of what the things that you do. And so there's so many different ways to move it forward, but it does have to have a hunger and curiosity, I think, for your performance and moving your own personal edge forward. I mean, I think that's no matter, where you are in your career, where you're just starting, you're like, oh, I'm just an assistant nurse manager. I just got my very first position, and I'm already very actually unhappy because it's so stressful because you don't know how to balance things. And I think people need to realize that there might be some organizational solutions, but there's also so many more private, entities like myself and you, and also there's like all kinds of things online, and there's YouTube, and there's also through your professional societies like that you are already a member of. They're actually now partnering to be able to internally curate resources to help small little action steps.
So it's very interesting you say that, right? So yes, we should not wait for others to do for us, right? If you have a plan, if you have a big dream, then you need to act small. So one of the things I've been really working on over the last couple of 3 months is to come up with some tools that people can use, like a FACI quiz to see, am I ready to go to a fellowship? Am HFMA quiz? Am I ready to be that financial leader? Am I dreaming big, but am I taking small steps to reach my big dream? And what does that really look like? What does that journey look like? What is my leadership DNA? And that's not another DISC analysis where they give you some label and no action items with it, right? So by doing these, and by the way, they're for free available on my homepage at dutchmentor.com. I encourage anybody to take that because it's the first step. But interesting enough is this, that our human behavior, as you well know, gets into the way of accomplishing the things. 88%, and that's the scariest really statistic that is out there, of the people who take initiative, they want something, fail by day 30. Right, so it is our own behaviors that get in the way. It doesn't make a difference if you're following a diet, or you exercise, or you read, or you study, or you're starting a new program, or a new initiative at work. Our sustainability, ability to sustain, to either get to that sustainability phase of a project, we are not very good at. And that is something that we first need to face, right? So it's not even the skills around leadership. It's really the behavior of leadership. And that's really where I spend most of my time, is to get people to understand that, listen, you can put all kinds of tools in the box, but if your behavior doesn't support those tools, you will not be successful, right? And that's really where the real change needs to be driven. And people need to understand that, I am the weak link in the chain. Now, interesting enough, pride and ego stands in the way of many things, right? And it's part of society. Again, is that as a male, I can be vulnerable. I can't cry. I cannot speak of that. I'm getting burned out. I have not. So therefore, they don't speak up, and many of them are left behind and never find joy in the work that they really do. Right now, women have the same, but thank God to a lesser extent, because 85% of my clientele are women who see that they need some help and they're willing to ask for help. I think guys need to really look in the mirror and say, listen, I don't care what other people think of me. If I really want to have that societal impact as a healthcare administrator, as a doctor, as a nurse, and and follow my dreams, I too need help. And I too need to make an investment in self. And that's where the question always comes in, but the investment in self, the hospital should do it. Well, I want you to look at it completely different. If you go and sign up for a mentor, and listen, you go to the most expensive, let's say you spend $10,000 a year for that. If that $10,000 results in a 10 to 15% raise in the next year alone, that raise, 15% raise, 10 to 50% raise over the next 30 years is worth somewhere between $500,000 to $750,000. So can you not afford to do that? Right. So, and that's really, again, we don't talk about that often enough. Small investments up front lead to large returns in the future. No different than if you put money into SpaceX this last week and sit on it for the next 10 years. Right? You are SpaceX. You are Amazon. You need to invest in yourself to get that return. And if you don't, well, some of you make it, and most of you won't.
Yeah. So interesting, like whenever you talk with different coaches, in terms of what philosophically sort of underpins our intention to change theory, practice, you talk about behaviors. And so I think for me, I really focus mostly on awareness of self and the identity, because of the identity and the desire to own this name, to own the word leader. I mean, there's some people who actually are still uncomfortable with that word.
Yeah.
So surprisingly, it's not surprising that there is like some degree of a image or a perspective that they need to release so that they can fully own it and understand that their own unique expression of their own particular intersection of culture, experience, perspective really is the best thing about what makes them unique as a leader. And once they begin to own that, then the rest begins to follow. Their thoughts and their actions and their habits begin to change. And I agree with you. The people who come to coaching tend to be people who are willing to invest in themselves, and also know to advocate, to include it in their promotion, in their recruitment package. Everyone knows with career transitions, it's really important to have that. And what we're hoping to gain more awareness is not just chief nurse officers and not just executive C-suites in hospitals, but really should become more available to anyone. So as soon as you're a new program director or you're a new nurse assistant manager, you may not need a year long, but you might need 6 months just to kind of get your footing, to get a new rhythm of life, because all these things that we have to manage up, lateral, and down is a whole new world. And to not know what your structure of support is going to be is really challenging during those times.
Listen, being the middle manager is the most difficult position in management, right? You get the shit from the bottom and you get the shit from the top, part of my friends. But it is something that is real. And if you don't have the skills, knowledge, and abilities to handle that, that will lead to burnout. And many great people end up leaving management and leadership because they were not given proper guidance. So I truly believe that the recruitment firms out there should do a better job in getting people ready for interviews. Right? They should offer coaching and mentorship programs to the people so they will have and more honest conversations with them to say, listen, you're not ready, but this is what you can do to get ready. And then once these people are placed, and remember that hospitals or healthcare organizations or industry is paying big dollars for recruitment, right? A physician can cost $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to put somebody in, and then we just let them go. Well, the next thing is once we onboard anybody from a middle manager, supervisor up to AVP level, they should have a coach and a mentor to work with for the next 6 months. For the bare minimum, once a week for 30 minutes to debrief and goals
Yes.
for the next week, and allow them to spill their guts without having to fear, well, if I talk to this person and that person, just create that safety zone. And in that safety zone, once a week for 30 minutes, you get to continue to build and decompress and to raise self-awareness and become that highly effective leader you always wanted to be. It's a tiny little investment that can lead to massive returns for self and certainly for the organization as well. Why? Because if you lose one person because you were a bad manager, and that recruitment, the recruitment or the loss factor, right? That's not anywhere on the P&L, could be 40, 50, 60, $100,000. Well, the coach or mentor could have prevented that most likely at a cost of maybe $5,000 or $10,000. And that's
Right.
really where people need to be more insightful from a financial standpoint and the senior leadership itself. And for that matter too, listen, the loneliest spot in the hospital is the guy or girl who sits on top of the organization, right? And they too should have a safe zone where they can go and really let go on a weekly basis, so they can keep perspective and also have openly bouncing ideas without judgment from their peers. So this, listen, coaching mentorship is important for everybody. It can be done on a voluntary basis, but people should not be afraid to make that investment in self.
Right. So for people who are listening who are about to get promoted or applying for positions, and they just they decide like, well, you know what, I do want to do this. And so when you start to coach an emerging leader for someone who's just new to the very first positions and they want to be in it for a while, they probably want to be in that position probably for a bit to learn and grow and really settle in. Where do you even have them start? Because they're still pretty junior, and that's okay. What is the first habit or behavior that you build before all of the other ones?
Yeah, so the Pure Leadership Power is really a 1, 2, 3 step program. So when I work with anybody, the first assessment always starts with self-awareness. So what is your true why? Why are you connected? What is your purpose, your passion on your heart level? And what are the people and process you really want to work with, to make sure there's true alignment there. And there's multiple exercises. I try to get people to first build a 30 to 40-second why statement. And it is very difficult to do, and it takes multiple renditions to do. But I want them to be able to speak it with confidence, like an elevator speech. If somebody says, "Hey, who are you? What are you doing here?" That comes fluently. Because storytelling starts there, right? Most people don't really know how to set up a story, the beginning, middle, and end, in 30 to 40 seconds. People sometimes ramble on for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes and lose the audience in the process. So it all starts at that first. So it starts your why, your personal brand, really understanding what is your individual development plan, what is your big dream, what small acts do you need to commit along the way. Then we dive deeper into what kind of a leader are you today? What is your vision of leadership? So that's why I use the dna.thedutchmentor.com, where you can do a free quiz to assess your leadership archetype. And then based on that, you start learning what adjustments you need to make in order to gain strength in any of the four quarters. And that then we teach very quickly that through measurement, you get results. And again, remember, habit building is very difficult. Habit building takes 90 to 120 days to create new normals. And right then and there, that step, many of them will say, yes, I will do that. But then if you follow that, they don't measure. So they don't get the outcomes that they seek per se. So again, for that, I built that smart app. So whenever you do the DNA leadership quiz, it actually ports straight over into a leadership tracking tool where you can get 5-minute lessons to support your growth, but also you have the ability to track it red, yellow, and green and how well you're doing. And if you yellow or red, then there might be a consequence or a countermeasure that is put into place. So again, it is the combination of raising self-awareness, really understanding your journey, setting some key milestones, albeit learning on the job, having a coach and mentor, or getting another certification or a degree, but really building your capabilities up in order to be able to set up for success. This part 2 is to learn early on to not be a firefighter. right?
Mm.
Firefighters, we see a problem, we put the flames out, we'll move on, only have to come back and keep doing that the same thing. Stop putting band-aids on things. So I teach everybody how to do Lean Six Sigma A3 thinking. So really understand what the root cause of the problems are, so you can solve the problem and test it, measure it, sustain it, and therefore you will have more time to work on innovation, less time on always coming back to the same issues. That could be a difficult conversation, or that could be fixing a problem with IT, right? It could be a variety of things. And the third part of that is to develop an operational rhythm for yourself and for the organization. And that really speaks to a culture of oneself and culture of the organization. But there are concrete steps you can take that no matter what you do, you always need to have the right people in the right roles with the right skills, knowledge, and abilities, and time to do it, including, do I have the time to bring my best version of myself forward? Are we
Right.
unified? Are we aligned? Is there a true North Star? Are we measuring the right things, both the drivers and the outcomes? Is there a cadence of accountability? Are we meeting on a weekly basis in order to be able to assess how well we performed against what I said I would do? If not, what's the consequence of that? And of course, taking proper actions and consequences. And that if you put that pure leadership power 1, 2, 3 together, and you exercise that every single day, the outcomes are undeniable. I've seen it over and over and over. Those clients who bought into it early, who are very on top of it, on having their weekly meeting, make sure that they measure it and maintain their scorecards. I have no doubt that all of them did, I have to prove that they all did much better. And within 18 months, they all were promoted, and they all received 15 to 20% or more raises in their work. And again, over 30 years, that's a $500,000-$600,000 return on investment. So the proof is in the pudding, right? It's no different than we talk about FACI. I want everybody to be at the highest level, and I want them to pursue the FACI credential, because that is an attestation that you have now a deep understanding of the value stream of healthcare. And again, I put 40 people into cohort. 20 of them will finish. 10 of them will actually sit for the exam. Why?
Mm.
Not because they don't have the skills, knowledge, and ability, because they don't have the behavior, right? And that's where we really need to make the change in order to get people to understand what do you need to do to be truly successful and have more predictable outcomes. And if you follow that 1, 2, 3 philosophy I just gave you, I guarantee you will have better outcomes. But that's difficult. This is not easy.
No. And I would say probably it's iterative, right? I think the reality that I think for some people who are listening, like, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? This is the kind of dedication it takes, perhaps. And at the same time, if you really want it, and it's part of something that you want to do for this lifelong journey of becoming a leader in healthcare, whether it be just locally, whether it's be nationally, whether it's with the ACHE, and no matter what profession, no matter what role you come to in healthcare, we all have the ability and opportunity to be able to try to change things for the better for whatever profession we are, whether we're a nurse, a physician, finance, IT, HR. All of these roles are really important to be able to make healthcare better for the long haul.
It's a team sport, right?
Mm-hmm. It
But
is.
to see the
And
purpose
so,
of getting a patient healed and on their way without being financially ruined.
yes. I think that's like the nicest thing about realizing when we're out of just our one discipline or one lane, we realize at the end of the day, the same habits are what's necessary for all of us to be able to be a leader. And really, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can do it alone. And so it is really helpful to realize that when we are with other people in that same journey, trying to build those habits, trying to change our mindset, trying to make those systems like you're describing of like from beginning towards the end, and then we just iterate, right? I mean, so I'm iterating 20 years later. You're still iterating, right? We're all iterating on how we lead and what we do
That's
and who
part of
we
your growth mindset, right? Those
Mhm.
people who don't iterate become stale, and when you become stale, you become stagnant, and when stagnant dies off, right? No different than a dead branch on a tree. It is you have to continue to be innovate, and especially in today's world
Mhm.
with AI, you better get on top of it and better play, because if you don't, that can be problematic. So.
Yeah. So any final concluding thoughts as we come to the end of our episode today?
So, I think it is a really much needed conversation, and I'm happy that you're having it. I'm having it on my Smart Performance podcast as well, and I hope that a small percentage of people who are still hanging in there with us actually takes meaningful action. Go to my website, thedutchmentor.com. Find some of these free tools. Do a FATSI quiz, do an HFMA quiz, do a leadership quiz, do something, and then take meaningful action with that. Right? There's lots of great things out there, but if you don't take action on a daily basis, weekly basis, it can become, career ending, or certainly you will not get to where it is that you want to go. Few of them will, but most of them won't. And again, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anybody. Again, go to my website and book a call. And I encourage people to, dream big and act small.
I love that. Thank you so much, Walter, for being here on the podcast with us. And for anyone who's listening, who's interested in finding out more, we'll put all these links in the show notes below on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and here on LinkedIn, my favorite place to be. And please let us know what else you'd like to hear about at podcast@transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. And for anyone who else is listening, please, the best thing you can do for either of us, both myself and Walter, is to share this with a colleague. Share this with your chief HR officer. Let them know that there are so many other ways that they can support, not just internally, but to just provide the opportunity for information and free education, assessments. Knowledge is power. And then the next is obviously taking action. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.